Good morning, Facebook world. So this morning I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about assumptions, and it kind of came into play with a conversation we had yesterday that I had with somebody else. That so many times we assume that other people are hearing what we're saying, and it can cause major issues. Not only in relationships, but productivity from a business standpoint. And so just making sure that we really understand how to kind of avoid making assumptions and being aware that we're doing that, because awareness is a big part of it. And so kind of an example that I want to use is going 100% into a conversation. And so as humans, we expect the other person to come 50% and we come 50%. But what happens is that we sometimes miss each other. And I do it with my kids all the time. So I'll tell them to do something, and then I'll say, Aubrey or Zane, I said, what did you hear me say? And the stuff that they come back with, it's so funny. And sometimes it is so wrong but so many times we'll tell people something and we just assume that they understand. And in business, it's really important, because a lot of times we'll, tell people to go, hey, so-and-so, I need you to go get this done. And so they're hearing maybe one thing, and they'll go do it, and then you're unhappy with the results. And it's because, you didn't necessarily clarify the situation. So it's kind of like, I don't know, me telling somebody to, go to Bluefield, they need to be there by noon, but I'm going to take your iPhone, I'm going to take your map, you have no way to get there, and I'm not going to give you any directions. And so that's a big thing with making assumptions. And so when you go into a relationship or a conversation with somebody, make sure you say, what are your assumptions about me going into this relationship? And because a lot of times you might be surprised, and your children are huge. Ask your children, so what are your assumptions about me? And, you might be surprised, and it might open up a new way to have a relationship with different people. And it can be life-changing for so many. And the next thing that I kind of want to talk about, and, with assumptions, is that so many people, they'll be going through just hell, and they'll have, they may be going through a divorce, and they may have, loss of a loved one, or just all kinds of situations. And we tend to drag that baggage with us, and we just, pull it along, and it's exhausting if we continue to do that. So a good practice, and, I saw this in a class I took years and years ago, is that you have the event, you have something that happened, and then everybody creates a story around the event and they connect it, but they're actually not connected. So a perfect example is the, Boston Marathon bombing. If you asked 100 people what that meant to them or what happened, you'd have 100 different answers. And so we have to disassociate the story from the event and be able to kind of wrap it in a package and compartmentalize it, so we're able to move forward with our life, because otherwise we are dragging a lot of stuff behind us, and then we start looking at the world through those lenses, and it might not be fair. I mean, because a perfect example is I had a conversation with my father, and so he grew up at a totally different time than I did. And so I was telling him about my business coaching and how it's really exciting to see people's lives transform. And he point blank, he said, I'd never take coaching advice from a woman. And he said, why don't you stick to coaching women? And so I kind of paused for a second, and I said, but let me think about this, Dad, because you took advice from Mom for, 30 years. And, I said, you were good at swinging a hammer and, building houses, but you had no idea how to do the business side. And Mom is really the one that helped you bring this business through. I said, so what I'm hearing you say is that you basically don't, believe I can do what I'm wanting to do. And he kind of paused for a second, and he said, well, I went to a woman therapist once before, and I really listened to her. And, she was great. And I said, okay, so now you're your preconceived notion that you've had since you've grown up as a child, because that's been instilled into you to be very traditional. Now it's shifting and it's changing because of the conversations and the questions. And he's able to separate the events that he grew up with in his childhood and look at life through different lenses, which is maybe he can listen to, and take advice from a woman for coaching. So it's really, really important to be able to disassociate the two, to be able to move forward. And I'll tell you, I went to this, it's called the Landmark Forum, and I went years and years ago, and it's a forum of like 500 people. And there was this woman in the forum, and she was probably 23 years old, and she blamed, I think it was her 23rd birthday, and she was blaming everything on her mom. My mom is the reason I can't have relationships. My mom is why I can't hold jobs. My mom is why I don't have a good relationship with my daughter. My mom, my mom, my mom. And so the woman leading the class, she said, so tell me about your mom. When did you make this assumption about your mom? And she said, well, when I was 5 years old, my mom told me to clean the bathroom. And so I went in and I cleaned the bathroom the best I could. And my mom came in and said, are you finished? And she said, I'm done. And so she said, she inspected the bathroom, and she said, where are the cleaning products? And so she said she reached under the counter, and when she opened the door, her mother slammed her head into the cabinet and ripped her out by her hair and beat her and said, do it again. And she said, so who's your mom? And she said, my mom's a monster. And she said, okay, let's go through the story again. She told the story over and over again, and everybody in the class could see what the instructor was getting at. And she said, so what is your mom? And she's like, my mom's a monster. And she said, no, your mom is your mom. You've created this story because of an incident that happened when you were 5 years old. You're 23 years old, and you still think of your mom as a monster because of something that happened when you're 5. So part of the course is you have to complete that conversation. So she called her mom that night, and she said, Mom, I just want to tell you that, when I was 5 years old and when you did this, it forever, I had this opinion that you're a monster, and I want you to know that you're my mother and I love you. I love you for, raising me, and I want to have a relationship with you. And from that moment forward, it changed her relationship with her mother, and it changed her life. She had been dragging that around since she was 5 years old. So as soon as we can disassociate the events from how it made us feel and not connect the circles, we can move forward in life. And I think that, that's just, we make all these assumptions and we draw all these conclusions that aren't necessarily real. And we just have to separate the two and then be able to move forward. And it's easier said than done. It definitely takes practice, and it's a process. But hopefully it'll help some of you all out, and you have a wonderful day.